details are quite important to me. You were talking about classroom size and how the schools are going to be divided up. That is important in deciding whether we want to do this or not. We have a lot of police protection in Merchantville, and if you hear people talk out there, they're very worried about losing it. So, you know, yeah, we do need those details. We really do before we can decide. We don't need them down to the last dot on the last I, but we need more than just a generalization.
Oh, absolutely, but it's not to the operational level where you're moving people around. It's the fact that, okay, Merchantville will have whatever amount of coverage, and how that coverage looks is the operational aspect.
Which again, I think, to make a clear decision, some of that we need.
So one thing again, when we look at it, there will be some obvious things that will be assumptions if the towns consolidate.
Right.
There are only going to be one superintendent of schools, and whatever fiscal implications that has. There's only going to be one chief of police. There's only going to be one director of public services. I'm sitting here now, and why we have to study this. I don't know what the fire service would look like in a consolidated community. Actually, I'll plead ignorance about the confusion of Cherry Hill and why we have so many elections. But you know, those things we'll have to look at and study, and each of those things has a dollar amount attached to it. And an assumption I carry, which I assume is one that most people would carry going into this, is people are not looking for their taxes to increase as a consequence of a consolidation. So that will drive some decisions, and then people will have to come to their own decision as voters if we present this to you about whether they're satisfied with the projected level of services that they would be getting based on a projected tax rate.
Just a comment, not a question. Go back to something you said 2 minutes earlier, building on what she said. I don't expect you to come up with the operational patrol plan, but if you commit to, you know, 100 police officers, down to whatever the number is, someone better already have had the operational plan worked out, because they're going to be held to that as soon as the merger happens. And so they already have to have talked and worked out that plan. And doesn't mean you guys have to do it, but you have to ensure that it got done before it goes to the voter. Not after it goes to the voter. Because then it's in question as to whether they accepted it or not.
And one piece of that, that's a wise comment, as we go through the process, we as a commission are going to have some level of cooperation and collaboration from the two municipal governments to do that kind of work.
Yeah, exactly.
But that becomes a question as to whether or not that type of legwork is going to be done by a consultant versus this committee or subcommittee partnering with the various departments to bring that information together. So again, I think it's looking at the whole thing opposed to just what we're trying to put together for RFP is where we started.
And I think that's the reason why the Camden County Police Force is going to be such a big problem. You have to get people to agree as to how it's going to work. It's one thing to say I'm going to save this money, but you have to have a plan that says, I got more chance of John Trumbull throwing his hair back. Okay? Because it ain't going to happen. I know that now. Okay? Hopefully you guys will have someone will have a better plan.
Right.
Okay?
And we don't disagree with that.
All I know is in my prior life I had 22 armed officers report to me for a police force in Camden for 40 acres. It was an expensive piece of business.
Just a caution, and it's kind of ironic that you're bringing up firemen or policemen, because in Cherry Hill we have experience with consolidation of fire departments foisted on us by DCA many, many moons ago. We started out with 40 paid firefighters and 260 volunteers. And after we had to consolidate, we now have 120 paid firefighters and 10 volunteers. Speaking personally, my fire tax went up 400%. So it's not what you think is going to happen, it's what really happens. When Tom says, let's do some studies, I'm sure DCA said, oh, this is the best thing to do to consolidate fire departments in Cherry Hill. It was the worst. And I think we picked up, when you get into details, 30 seconds on a fire call. I know we could argue that 30 seconds is going to save a life, right? For sure, you can't put a value on a life. But nonetheless, it raised the fire taxes immensely. And I don't think Merchantville is going to be happy with Cherry Hill taxes.
We're not happy with our taxes either.
That's low-hanging fruit right there.
One final suggestion, I too read the same report that Mrs. Moriarty talked about. It's on the website, and I would recommend that all of you as commissioners read it as well, because I think it points to the one big potential cost increase factor. We talked about how consolidation is supposed to reduce costs or have a potential to reduce costs. I think, if I remember correctly, the number is as much as 80 additional high school students. If all of the eligible Merchantville high school students who could go to a public high school instead of the private schools that they now attend, that would add 80 additional students to the public school. Because I think the survival rate, they said, of the kids who graduate from 8th grade in Pennsauken who go to Pennsauken high school is about 35%, if I remember the number correctly. And while I'm sure not all of the other 80, I think some 50 some that now go to Pennsauken, but there's some 80 more who could go to a public school. I'm sure not all of those would just drop out of Camden Catholic or whatever private school they're going to, but a good portion of them might. And that is going to be a factor that you really need to consider, because that's an additional cost that's not currently borne by
We've talked about that a little bit already. It's that will be a key piece of it. And again, what all of us have to recognize is there's no absolute certainty in it. There's going to be questions about how parents would react and what the data actually is, and that's one of the things we want to get as close to certainty as we can, but we can't tell you they're going to be, I'm sure we can't tell you sitting here today, certainly whether they're going to be 53 additional children or 61 additional children who are going to go from a particular class to the Cherry Hill school system, if that's the way it goes. So we would have a range of answers there, but we fully appreciate that the current number of students going to Pennsauken if going to a Cherry Hill or Haddon Township for that matter would be considerably higher.
But then I think just to add to that, one thing that the Cherry Hill Board of Education is working on right now, concurrently with the work of this commission, although not, and I think this data could ultimately support what we're doing, and it could also get to something that's already out there that we might not even need a consultant to do for us. We actually, as part of our strategic planning, have projections, enrollment projections for each of our buildings through 2015 and through 2020, to the point where we can now say, okay, what's the enrollment of Clara Barton Elementary School going to be in the year 2018? That kind of thing. What's the enrollment at Cherry Hill West going to be in 2014, 2019? So we have that information already at our fingertips, which I think would greatly inform the work we're doing here. But part of what we're doing with that strategic planning work is coming up with a number of different enrollment increase scenarios. So for example, we're looking at what would be the impact on the district of further building of the track or other further building in Cherry Hill, bring X number of kids to what schools. We're also looking at what would be the potential impact of a Merchantville merger as well. So if we were to bring 80 students in 5 years from now, 4 or 5 years from now, do we have the seats at High School West? Do we have the seats at Carusi Middle School? That kind of thing. So that's going on in real time right now concurrently with the work here. And then once that data is finalized, which will be very soon, we can do that in the process.
And I'm going to say publicly here, Seth, that I think that the data that was established by what the Board of Education did is something that would be able to be melded right now into your information.
Right.
so that, because those are as current data as possible, and I thank the school board for helping us in this respect, of giving us the current data, that can be used to help with projections should a merger happen, and be able to present good information back to the